So the Texas Longhorns have decided to cancel their future home and home series with the Arizona State Sun Devils in 2031 and 2032. Now, on its own, it's mildly disappointing. In context, it's something else entirely because this isn't isolated. It's becoming part of an alarming trend in college football. For example, the Mississippi State Bulldogs have recently canceled their scheduled series with Texas Tech. That's not one example. There's others, and there will continue to be more. Suddenly, we're seeing a pattern. SEC programs backing away from non-conference games against other Power 4 opponents, and namely Power 4 opponents from the Big 12 and the ACC. Now, the official explanation that they're giving is tidy. The SEC is moving to a 9-game conference schedule. That means they have to drop a non-conference game. Perfectly reasonable, except in 2031 and 2032, Arizona State was Texas' only non-conference opponent. They didn't have anybody else on the schedule pre-scheduled for 2031 and 2032. So they didn't need to drop them from the schedule. They didn't need to drop a Power 4 team to make room for anyone. They chose to. And the reason why tells you everything about the current state of college football. From Austin primarily, but there has been growing sentiment since Texas' so-called unfair exclusion from the college football playoff. The argument goes like this. If Texas hadn't scheduled a difficult non-conference opponent, in this case Ohio State, and instead scheduled a cupcake, they would have made the playoff. Now, this argument conveniently ignores two minor but crucial details. One, they lost to 4-8 Florida. You take that game away, that was a game that they should have won, and instead they get beat by a team that got beat to USF. And then they turned around and got absolutely dismantled by Georgia. And the stupid thing about it, going into that game, Texas is still very much in the playoff hunt. And if Texas just plays Georgia close, they probably make the college football playoff. Instead, they get absolutely drubbed. They are one of the first teams out. But those facts are less useful to the narrative. The narrative is this, though. The committee didn't reward the quality loss, and therefore Texas must protect itself. And here's where this becomes revealing, because the entire argument hinges on strength of schedule. And I'll say something mildly controversial, not really. Strength of schedule, as it's commonly used in college football, is an inherently flawed metric. Why? Because it's largely built on completely subjective ratings. It's based on preseason expectations, media perception, brand reputation, poll inertia. It is not a clean, objective measure like point differential or record. It's opinion stacked on top of more opinion. So when teams are told they must schedule harder opponents to improve the metric, that in itself is subjective, and they begin to question the value of the exercise altogether. If strength of schedule is elastic, if it bends to brand perception, then why voluntarily increase the risk? There's a few forces converging here. First, the SEC mystique has taken a hit. Recent playoff performances have chipped away from the aura of invincibility. Second, ESPN has a substantial financial stake in the SEC maintaining the national dominance, which, by the way, the SEC is not holding up their end of the bargain, as we just mentioned. The mystique is gone. They did not beat a single Power 4 opponent in the college football playoff that was not another SEC team. Even Paul Feinbaum came on TV and admitted that the SEC was absolute garbage last year. Fewer resume wins means fewer playoff arguments. You don't need conspiracy to understand the incentives. If the SEC stops scheduling dangerous non-conference opponents, there are fewer opportunities for the Big 12 and the ACC to score resume wins. By not scheduling the Big 12 or the ACC, you're taking away, first of all, chances for the Big 12 and ACC to prove themselves, and conversely, for the SEC to prove themselves not worthy. And the current incentive structure says avoid risk, protect the brand, maximize playoff probability. Now, here's the part that makes me sick about all of this, because I have made fun of Texas relentlessly. I will continue to make fun of Texas relentlessly, by the way. This is the softest movement that I have ever seen from a single fan base ever. I mean, to actively be rooting for your school to never schedule Ohio State again, to be pulling for your team to only ever schedule cupcakes, and to maybe stumble their way into one reasonably good game a year because you happen to be in the SEC. Oh, and by the way, those games aren't as good as they used to be because the SEC is starting to fall apart. The uncomfortable part here is Texas is absolutely right. Why should they schedule difficult non-conference opponents? Their logo alone guarantees relevance. Texas could theoretically play in the Sun Belt and still begin the season probably ranked number 1 in the country like they were last year. Their brand carries weight independent of a resume. In fact, Texas is one of the few schools, in my opinion, that could probably handle being just an independent team altogether. They could play a schedule like Notre Dame or more likely play a schedule like UConn plays and find their way into the college football playoff every year. If the playoff committee demonstrates that perception outweighs objective results, then difficult non-conference games become an unnecessary risk. Universities are not in the business of unnecessary risk. They're in the business of maximizing access to revenue and championships. Period. So Texas is behaving logically, as crazy as it sounds. It's the system that is illogical, and Texas is taking advantage. There is no governing authority in college football capable of forcing elite programs to play each other outside of conference structures. None. Imagine if the NFL was operating this way. Imagine Kansas City simply declining to play the Buffalo Bills because it introduces unnecessary playoff risk. The league would collapse into a competitive farce. But in college football, this is perfectly permissible because there is no centralized league structure at all. There's no unified media rights. There's no legitimate commissioner with enforcement power. The NCAA lost all of its power really in the 80s, but in the last 10 years, what little power they had left got completely pulverized. It's just conferences protecting themselves the best they can, and some have done better than others. The SEC and the Big Ten have done a lot better than the Big 12 and the ACC. And until college football pools its rights and forms a true national league with a governing body capable of mandating competitive balance, the trend will accelerate. The brands will isolate, risk will diminish, the regular season will weaken and weaken and weaken, and playoff access will become more about perception than performance. Yeah, even more than it is now. Even more than it has been in the last 100 years. Even more than it was when it was simply the AP poll just deciding who they thought was the best team in the country every year. So yeah, Texas canceling Arizona State is disappointing. But in this very specific case, and I mean this very specific case, put this in a box. Don't apply this logic to anywhere else for the University of Texas. Texas isn't the villain. They're simply responding rationally to a flawed system. And when rational factors operate inside a broken structure, you can't blame the actors. You have to fix the structure. It's either that or you're going to watch the sport slowly game itself into something even more unrecognizable than it is now. When we come back, we'll talk about Texas Tech men's basketball. This is the Flatland Sports Podcast presented by Midwest Helmets.